Hey, what is up guys? It's Lewpac here and welcome to another Albion Online video. Today's video is the long delayed meta snapshot for the month of September. I apologize for the lack of uploads recently. You may notice that this is September and we did miss the August meta snapshot. August wasn't particularly exciting. There wasn't a lot of change from the previous month until we received the big balance patch. And then I kind of wanted to wait until the balance patch settled before I released the updated meta snapshot because so much seemed to have changed and I wanted to see which builds had stuck and which were, gonna be tried but then ditched straight away. On top of that, obviously I was away at Gamescom during August, and then a big bit of news on a personal level. In September, I welcomed a new member to my family. My wife and I had a second daughter to add and complete our little family. So with the new baby and a lot of other stuff going on, videos and content creation have had to sort of fall to the wayside for a little bit. I am back now though and looking very much forward to the Queen update, that's for sure. We've also got some more stuff coming. I'll be doing a review of the recent balance patch notes very, very shortly. And we've got some other stuff in the pipeline. The live streams are back as well, Monday to Friday. You can check out the Albion content at twitch.tv/Lewpac. That aside then, let's get on with the meta snapshot for September. So each month we take a look at the 5v5 meta in Albion Online, and this month is no exception. There's been some big changes. The rise of the Forge Hammers, as you can tell by the title, is very evident in the 5v5 matches right now. The Forge Hammer auto attack build paired with that Hunter's Jacket for attack speed. This has been taking us by storm, honestly. They're being played so much. Also, a lot of the Carving Sword players have switched to Claymore. We've seen some Ironclads, some Staff of Balance, some Locust. We've seen a lot being tried right now, and we're just sort of finding out which is sticking to the meta. So without further ado, let's get into the rundown of what is what in 5v5s in Albion Online. First up then, as tradition, we're going to start with our tanks in Albion Online, and as it's been for the last few months, honestly, the tank representation has been pretty good. We've seen quarterstaffs, we've seen maces, we've seen hammers around the place. Now, the Forge Hammers which we're talking about are going to be covered under melee DPS because that's a bruiser build, even though the hammer is more traditionally a tanking weapon. But as for tanks, I would say that the mace is still cream of the crop. That two-handed mace with the snare charge and the purge is just so good. And the reason it's still so good is all three abilities are just top tier. Sacred Ground offers insane choke point control, Snare Charge is just a god tier route on a short cooldown, and Battle Howl is the absolute perfect counter to Nature. And as we're going to talk about later, Nature is the prevailing healer by a long shot, which just amplifies the power of the heavy mace. Judy armor and Guardian armor are the go-to armor options. The Judy helmet, however, has fallen out of favor, as has the Demon helmet. This is because in the recent balance patch, the CC resistance of cloth and leather armor was upped across the board. So crowd control in general is less effective against the softer targets now. And this has led to a big drop in the usage of Demon Helms, Judy Helms, hard stuns. It's a bit of a nerf to hammers. We'll talk about that in a second. I think hammers are still playable, but they definitely got nerfed with this patch. However, the go-to helm now for tanks seems to be Fiend's Cowl. That additional purge is good for countering Nature, good for debuffing the bows, which we're seeing a lot of, removing soldiers' armors. There's so many things that want purging in a fight right now. Having an extra purge on the tank helm slot is certainly good. Other weapons that are seeing play though, the Great Hammer is still pretty strong. Tackle is a great ability, and Nurturing is a great ability in the correct situations. An Iron Breaker, extra armor pierce is never a bad thing. I just don't think it's on the level of the power level of the mace. We've also seen some people running Ironclad for the more traditional Kidnap build, and we have started to see Staff of Balance anti-heal builds coming back into play. We've seen some people have success with this. I don't think it's quite S tier yet. I definitely feel that it needs a bit of fine-tuning on the builds they're using for more anti-heal, maybe bringing in something like a halberd for more anti-heal, cultist sandals for anti-heal, stack the anti-heal and just pile on the pressure. Combine it with purges and it's really hard for a Nature to keep up. So there's a list of of decent tanking weapons. For the boots, Fiend Sandals for the swap or the Judy boots for the knock-up are both still super popular choices. We've seen a few people running different stuff. As I said, Cultist Sandals for the anti-heal, Night Boots even for an extra save in a pinch, because tanks don't generally need escapes as often as other characters. We've even seen a couple of people starting to run the Malevolent Locust arcane tank that we saw during the Rampant meta, although I won't really talk in depth about that unless it's still going next month. So that's it for tanks. You can take a look at the lists up on this video and see what you think about that, and we'll move on. So onto the healers then, and there honestly isn't a lot of change right now. The Nature Druidic Staff is still the go-to. Some people are still running the Redemption Staff for Holy. There's some other stuff being run in double healer setup. Some people have even tried the Blight Staff, but the Druidic Staff and its unpurgeable Spiritual Seed still are rising to the top. Now, we do have the same build going on. Generally, it's the Druid Armor, Guardian Helm, and then Blink Boots on the healers, but the Graveguard boots, since the nerf, have kind of fallen out of favor. Some people are running Scholars as well. Scholar Sandals are a good option. I don't think the boot slot is fully confirmed. Mobility is key though, because it is still quite a divey meta. You've usually got a Claymore or Carving Sword plus Forge Hammers sticking to your healer, so you need to get those escapes. Again, because of all the purges, because of the prevalence of Mace, Refreshing Breeze is still the go-to W. Obviously, that will allow you to spread stacks from one player onto all 5 players on your team, meaning that you can keep up maximum stacks a lot easier. And it does make healing with a nature a lot easier in general. One thing I'm not a fan of, though, is when people are not facing tons of purge, they still use Refreshing Breeze, which in my opinion is a mistake. If you're happy that the enemy doesn't have a lot of purge options, I think Protection of Nature is better, especially with the single target dive nature of the meta. Being able to save somebody with that insane Protection of Nature Graveguard combo, or the Protection of Nature Spiritual Seed, just the survivability of Protection of Nature is super good in my opinion. So it does annoy me a little bit when I see people using Refreshing Breeze as a crutch for managing stacks in situations that don't call for it. However, most good teams are running a lot of purge, so you do need to be mindful of that when you're selecting your W skills. One Hand Nature I did think might see some play, especially as it's super powerful when paired with Refreshing Breeze, but everybody seems to prefer the Druidic because One Hand Nature's great, except that it is vulnerable to being purged, and the Spiritual Seed being unpurgeable just gives you that extra level of security, especially against teams that know to purge the HOTS when they're putting out the pressure. The next thing we're going to talk about then is, of course, the melee DPS. Now, this is arguably where the biggest changes have happened since the balance patch. There's been some major switch arounds going on with the melee DPS. First and foremost is the rise of the Forge Hammers straight to the top of the tier list. The Forge Hammer build with the Hunter's Jacket and often the Assassin Hood as well for cooldown reset has just been going absolutely wild, and these guys are putting out so much damage, especially when combined with the sword players that they're often paired with up front. Particularly the Carving Sword with the Fearless Strike, setting up the Armor Pierce so that the Forge Hammers can absolutely annihilate people. Giant Steps is a great slow as well, so that it keeps the target close to you and you can keep beating. And the Assassin Hood synergy just means that you get all your cooldowns back so quickly that you're a constant threat. Now, in my opinion, Forge Hammers do have a single hard counter in the form of Forceful Swing on the Ironclad and Staff of Balance, or basically from the Quarterstaff tree, but people don't really seem to be utilising it to any major effect. A few people have started to, but the argument is they'll simply switch to a Merc Hood and cleanse the Forceful Swing, which, while true, does then stop them having the Assassin's Hood, which means their uptime on Giant Steps and Hunter's Jacket haste is a lot less. Nevertheless, despite the fact that there is kind of pseudo hard counters for it, This has gone straight into S tier because just the damage output combined with the tankiness of the hammer line, the armor pierce from Ironbreaker, and the dash ability to pair with your boots means it's a mobile, powerful, tanky build that puts out a lot of DPS. Everything you want from a bruiser. Swords are still very prevalent as well. Nowadays, though, people have kind of switched over to the Claymore. The carving sword is still being played. The Claymore is a much cheaper option, though, and is still very, very powerful in terms of what it can output with that charge ability. So I'd say it's 50-50 distribution right now. Both the carving sword and Claymore are being played. Stalker's jackets and Hellion jackets are popular. Stalker's helm is pretty much a necessity for finishing the job on the low HP targets. And the boots, again, it's generally duty boots for the knock-up / mobility, or some sort of blink or scholar option for pure mobility. So there's a lot of variation there in the bruisers. Daggers are still not really seeing much play. We saw Bloodletters and Deathgivers for a while, a little back, but they're really not seeing a lot of mainstream right now. But the others are fairly represented. Spears have fallen out of the meta in these dive comps. The Trinity is still somewhat viable, but the Trinity slot has basically been replaced by the Forge Hammers. So most people have switched up that. They keep their sword player in a double frontline bruiser, and they've switched to Forge Hammer's sword and dropped the Trinity. However, the Trinity still has its place. It's still super good. Impaler was nerfed, and the Trinity is notoriously energy hungry. It's a real energy draining build as well if you're not running deflecting spin or any sort of decent energy management. But it's still playable. Unfortunately, as we said, daggers are nowhere to be seen right now in the 5v5 meta. That could change in the future. I'm sure with the upcoming Queen update, we'll get a balance patch with that as well. But this meta is going to stick around for a little while. So Forge Hammer's top of the pile. Check out the build lists and let me know what you think in the comments, of course. Finally then, the range DPS in Albion Online. We've almost gone full circle with range DPS here. Again, this is another one that's being super represented. We did see in the crossbow line, the comeback of the one-hand crossbow. A lot of people pairing it with the Crypt Candle for a while until they realized how easily you get dived. So I'd say Muzak or Facebreaker is the offhand of choice. Crypt Candle's still a potential option if you're feeling rowdy, but you've got to be so careful with it. Last month we saw a few people playing the heavy crossbow and trying to bring that back into the meta, but it was quickly dropped in favour of the one hand. The explosive burst from the one hand puts it at the top of the crossbow pile. Still not S tier, but definitely A tier playable for the crossbow. Likewise, the bow is being very well represented at the moment. Some people using the whispering bow for that super range harass and finishing when people are trying to escape. However, the normal bow is probably the most popular. The attack speed paired with the armor shred means that you can take down even the tankiest targets. And for the teams running a double backline, that crossbow bow combo is insane because the opening sunder from the crossbow with the explosive bolt sets up big early damage, and then once the enchanted quiver of the bow gets going, that maintains the armor shred and starts to do a lot more damage on top. So that's a really powerful backline combo that you do have to watch out for. I still feel that Frost, though, the permafrost prism that we've seen for a couple of months now, is top of the pile still. That is so powerful. It's had multiple nerfs. The Ice Shard has been nerfed. The permafrost is just so good, even with these nerfs. That AoE stun and damage, the fact that you get a double blink means you're very mobile, especially against these diving teams. And of course, it's got that insane Ice Shard. Even with the damage nerf to Ice Shard, it puts out so much damage when you're spamming it. It forces people to take awkward paths. It's just a constant annoyance that you have to sidestep. You can't just sit in it. And it also is really good against preventing Q spamming classes like Fire and enemy Frosts, because anytime anyone stands still, you just rain Ice Shards on them until they absolutely have to move. So Frost is still very well represented, and we have started to see Fire creep back in. The one-hand fire is actually received multiple buffs now. It's got a shorter cooldown and does more damage. So the one-hand fire is very viable in my opinion. The Infernal is still a good choice, and we've seen some people trying out the Great Fire. Fire doesn't have the utility slows of Frost, and honestly, the only thing keeping fire relevant is that Firewall is one of the greatest skills in the game. It's so powerful, especially against triple frontline divey comps. Firewall on its own makes fire playable, and the fact that one-hand fire can do these huge nukes now. Great Fire with the Infinite Energy Royal Cow build is great harass, great poke. I did see a lot of people trying to use the new ability, Fire Artillery. And I'll talk about this a bit more in the balance review, but Fire Artillery is in a 5v5 situation, or in most situations in fact. Fire Artillery is nothing compared to the power of Firewall. It just doesn't offer that utility. The damage output is not strong enough to replace Firewall. Firewall is one of the best single abilities in the game, pound for pound, with its effectiveness. And that's after a few nerfs to how it works as well over the years. It's still the only thing keeping Fire viable at the moment, and Frost probably is still a better choice overall. Curse then, another big sleeper. Arcane now not being able to purge HOTS with that one-hand Arcane meant that the Cloth Arcane DPS completely fell out of the meta. But Curse makes up for it in the form of the Great Curse Staff. I still consider this an absolute top tier weapon. The fact that you've got constant dot pressure, never have energy problems, which allows you to have quite an aggressive choice on the capes, means that you've just got huge damage pressure throughout the fight. And then the Desecrate is a root, so you've got crowd control, and then the E, Area of Decay, strips HOTS off of the target. So immediately when they group up and get their Refreshing Breeze HOTS, you can instantly remove them all. It's so good in this meta, and people honestly tend not to play it as much. And I feel it's because it's just not as flashy as the big explosive damage casts. But do not underestimate the value a good Great Curse player can bring to the fight. Now, the Guardian Helm has been buffed to reduce HOTS, to remove dots, and if Great Curse becomes too prevalent, we will see Guardian Helms put into comps. Right now, though, I don't see any comps running Guardian Helm, which means if they're not, the Great Curse is so strong. Even with Guardian Helm, the Guardian Helm's quite a long cooldown, so it's not like you're hard countered. It's still so playable, and I really think people should start looking for Great Curse in their comps, in this nature divey meta. Putting max stacks on the divers just limits the amount of time that they can stay in your front line trying to do DPS, trying to dive that back line and kill people. Because not only are they taking constant damage, they have to respect the fact that when they do pull back, they will still have the dots on them. So they have to pull back earlier knowing that they're still going to take damage even after they've escaped. So very interesting that it's not being overrepresented right now, the Great Curse. People going for the more bursty, more flashy DPS, but we'll see if that changes over the next month. That's going to be it then for this month's Meta Snapshot. As I said before, I will be releasing a video with a review of the recent balance patch, and we'll talk in depth more about the individual changes. So watch out for that on my channel. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video and you want to talk about the meta, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.